Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. Thank you for joining me here tonight for Teaching Liberty Live. I am Stephanie Edmonds, your host, and tonight we're going to be discussing a few news stories from the week, including the top story of the week, classified documents in Biden's House. Of course, we have the Democrats reacting, trying to play it down, and the Republicans acting, trying to play it up. And so we're going to kind of dig into all of that and the culture war angles. And then we're going to switch over to more medical freedom news. And I feel like every week I'm talking about it, but it really does seem that every week really breaking through into the mainstream are big medical freedom wins, like the military dropping the vaccine mandate. That was big news, big national news. And now we're going to talk about what it really means. They dropped the mandate, but what does that mean for people who are fired? What does that really mean for people who didn't take the thing but still have their job, but everybody knows they didn't comply, right? So getting news that the mandate is de facto still in place in that way, but we're going to dig into that too. And then also another big victory on that front is healthcare workers getting a big win in the New York State Supreme Court, which is not the Supreme Court of the United States. It's actually the lowest court in New York, but a win there for healthcare workers right on the heels of a strike of New York healthcare workers, which after a few days of striking out there did come to a deal. So we're going to get into all that and more. Make sure that you've hit that like button. Try to get this up in the algorithm. I see a couple of you guys on here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'm really trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark so I can monetize the channel. Really trying to put my focus over here. But also, of course, follow me on social media. I'm pretty big over on Instagram and Twitter. I've got those linked down in the description. So make sure you follow me over there. Leave a comment, drop a note in the DM, say what's up. And I usually have a co-host on here, but it didn't work out tonight. So if you want to join me at some point, please, let me know. I like to get people with different perspectives, different takes, different experiences, geographical locations to kind of discuss some of the big stories of the week. And so somebody's saying they didn't hear about the military dropping the mandate. Yes, they did drop the mandate. We're going to get into that and what that really means. And we're going to actually be talking a lot tonight about like how the headlines say one thing, but actually, if you dig into it or if you continue to follow the story, you'll see that that's not actually how the thing is, or the follow-up headline is nowhere near as big, or it's completely buried. And people think that, for example, New York City workers got their jobs back. But no, that's not the case because the follow-up headline did not exist that no workers got their jobs back and the state appealed. But again, we are going to get into that. And the top story I want to start doesn't have anything to do with the medical freedom stuff or anything like that. Just, regular kind of business, corruption as usual in Washington or stupidity as usual, whichever one you want to chalk it up to. And so we're going to start with that story here. Classified documents found at Biden's garage. But apparently, this isn't the first time. This is the second time in a fairly short period of time. So we're just going to get a little bit of an overview of the situation, and then I'm going to show you some of the the headlines that are quite tainted towards one side or the other, really playing into the culture wars and trying to suck us into that narrative too. And we really have to work hard to break out of that. So additional information was discovered and reported earlier this week and turned over to the Justice Department. Aides to President Joe Biden on Thursday evening found 5 additional classified documents, excuse me, in his Wilmington, Delaware home, and the White House announced Saturday. So his own people found it and reported it. So again, take that into account. Why are they doing this now? Why would they report it? Wouldn't they just like make moves to try to return the documents without anybody knowing? I don't know. Let's read on and find out more. The additional information was discovered and reported earlier this week and turned over to the Justice Department, according to a statement from Richard Sauber, special counsel to the president. So that's his legal department. Sauber, who has necessary security clearance to review sensitive materials, said he went to Biden's home in Delaware on Thursday to provide the Justice Department with classified materials that the Biden team had discovered a day earlier. While there, he had found 5 additional pages with classified markings. The Justice Department officials immediately took them to the possession of those materials. So, again, you can see this isn't somebody found these documents is trying to say, oh, look, Biden is a bad guy. This is Biden's own people saying, "Oh, look, we found these documents," and I think it seems like what they're trying to suggest is like, "Oh, look how good we immediately turn them over." So this announcement follows just days after Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed former U.S. Attorney Robert Hur as special counsel to investigate the storage of the documents. That announcement came just as House Republicans began issuing oversight demands into the matter. So this is just talking about what they're going to do. Let's see. The Biden House Secretary in this matter, the Biden White House Secretary in this matter is alarming. Equally alarming is the fact that Biden aides were combing through documents knowing there would be a special counsel appointed, he said in a statement. Many questions need to be answered, but one thing is certain: oversight is coming. All right, so that's another interesting thing, right? There's an investigation into Biden. So maybe part of that would be being able to go to his house. I don't know. Um, and maybe they wanted to see what was in there and they shouldn't have been seeing what was in there. So these are all questions that I hope when people are reading news articles, they ask themselves, they start to question, they start to think about the different pieces and who might have what, kind of different interests that they're playing in this game, and not just reading this as fact, or not just reading this as a Republican trying to bring down a Democratic source, or a Democrat being like, oh, this is the party line, right? Really reading things with that critical eye, not from any one side, but just asking all the questions and leaving room for all the answers. Some things just are coincidence, but that usually isn't the case. All right, so a steady new drip of information has widened the scope and the probe into Biden's handling of classified materials from his time as vice president. Has raised. So these are not recent materials from him being president. Now these are apparently like leftover. He didn't really kind of maybe realize he had them from when he was vice president. And of course, they're being compared to how Donald Trump had his documents at his private Mar-a-Lago club residence. And if you remember, over the summer or at the end of the summer, the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. Or was it after the election? I can't remember. At some point in the past few months, the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago and seized these documents, and everybody was trying to say, "Oh, how bad of a person Trump was for that." So the president's lawyers have acted immediately and voluntarily to provide Penn Biden documents to the archives and Washington documents to the DOJ. We have now publicly released specific details about the documents, identified how they were identified and where they were found, Saber said. The appointment of the special counsel in this matter this week means we will now refer specific questions to the special counsel's office moving forward. So this is kind of a little overview of the situation as it is so far. There are definitely some parts we might question as far as bias and what narrative that Politico might be trying to run, but I would say overall it did kind of give us a more or less objective view of what the situation was. Biden had these documents, they were found, his team turned them over. There's a special investigation going on. This comes on the heels of the Republicans also, talking about we're going to investigate Biden. So these are all things that we have to take into consideration. And then we have the more kind of this is my team kind of headlines here. So this is from NBC News, and it says Biden classified documents versus Trump classified documents. Because remember, in this article, it did also refer to how documents are found at Mar-a-Lago. What's the difference? And in this one, it says that the Biden papers appear to be a bad look for the president, but the circumstances are much different from those in the Trump case. So you can see here in this headline, they're trying to push, Biden, he had documents, but it's really not as bad as the way it happened to Trump, and it is a bad look, but if you look at it, he's actually kind of, doing the right thing. And so they go on and they tell that story here. And then on the Fox News side, which of course represents the Republican side, they're pushing the narrative Biden's irresponsible handling of classified documents, bigger leakage risk than Trump's, experts say. So, right, they're really trying to play up how big of a deal this is for Biden and really trying to play down how bad it looks for Trump. And I'm honestly, I don't think you could have predicted it any better if you were to ask what would be the Democratic take on this and what would be the Republican take on this, right? They are both just playing for their team. Yes, exactly. Both of these stories remind me of fake concocted stories just to get people worked up. And really, I've just noticed that more and more. And I do feel like it's very important to keep up with kind of the general what's going on in the world, what news is going on, but it's about how much of our time and energy are we devoting to that? Because when we devote too much energy to that, or when we just believe those headlines at face value without asking deeper questions, then we're playing in their story. And so, what I'm really trying to devote most of my time to is being outside that story, trying to figure out okay, what is their version of the story ultimately trying to lead to? What is this new financial sort of market that's going to be forming? What's the new job market that's going to be forming? Because we're for sure on the precipice of some huge change in the social and economic and geopolitical relations going on here. Fingers crossed it's not as chaotic and ugly as some of these past changes have been. Hopefully more people are prepared as such, but also just building something else. What can we do to fight against these forces that are tyrannical and coercive and corrupt, right? As in the case of these classified documents and the narratives there. And that's why I'm only trying to do this news show live once a week. Just really kind of get the content out and then put out those higher quality videos throughout the week where I'm talking about bigger ideas, bigger picture things, maybe reading some really good books. And I just hope that, again, when we're reading these stories, we have to be asking ourselves, okay, my biggest question isn't, okay, the classified documents. I really don't know how common it is for presidents to end up with classified documents at their house versus how much the media cares about reporting it, or Republicans and Democrats care about spotlighting it as this issue to distract us as it is meaningful. And so my really biggest question is, what else is going on right now? Is it just the fact that the Republicans are doing this investigation and Biden's trying to be like, oh, I'm the good guy here? Is he trying to get ahead of things and really figure out what do the documents say? Are they trying to control the headlines away from some other things? And so, again, I just don't want to be getting distracted. I want to be paying especially attention more to what's happening at the state level. And so I live in Connecticut. I live in the part of Connecticut. There's like, well, you guys are backwards. So, like, Connecticut, there's like a little piece that hangs off of it into New York. And I live, oh, there's a Connecticut right here. Okay, this is Connecticut. This is a little from Bob Stefanowski. He was the Republican candidate for Connecticut. So I live in the part of Connecticut that's like right down here, and it's super close to New York and New York City. And so I'm very involved in both kind of Connecticut and New York politics. And I feel so goes New York, goes Connecticut. And, it's very influential state, very much like California. It's a cultural capital, New York City. So in New York, there's a lot of bills that are being brought up right now or could potentially be brought up right now in this next voting session. So I think the number one authoritative place to go for information specifically pertaining to medical freedom and getting your updates, because again, we can't trust these headlines. They're not going to tell you the full story. The number one place that I go is Teachers for Choice. Teachersforchoice.org. This is updated by Michael Kane. He is a teacher like me who was fired for refusing to comply with the vaccine mandate in New York City. He created Teachers for Choice in August 2020, actually, when they started giving us the mandated COVID tests in schools. And we met up in about January 2021 or February 2021 when I had started Teachers for Open Schools, and we started just talking about how we could work together and where our platforms aligned. And he's just been a huge force. So teachersforchoice.org. And he recently put out this article about what are the bills that we need to watch in Albany. And again, even if you think that you live in a state that's safe or um, you haven't had any of these issues in the past, I urge you to pay attention because the past 2 years have really rolled out the red carpet for all sorts of interesting bills talking about health, talking about quarantine procedures, and sometimes they're not directly through the legislature. They are regulations that are being put out by the health department. So do a little research for your state, or very likely there's an organization like Teachers for Choice, which works with Children's Health Defense, the New York chapter, a lot too. Who's collected this information already, so you don't have to do all like the hardcore research, but you have to do some research to probably identify them. So in New York, there's a whole host of bills we have to watch out for. And I know over the past couple of days, as New York City or New York has gone into session up there, I was up in Albany last 4 days ago on January 10th. You can see my sign in the back. I don't co-parent with the government. We put out 500 signs saying different things all over the lawn of the Capitol. And so there's a bill to allow minors of any age to be given any medical procedure without parental knowledge or consent. So basically, if the kid could say, "Oh yeah, like I want that thing," like, "Oh, I want a piece of pizza, so I'll take the COVID vaccination." Oh, oh yeah, I definitely don't want to get cervical cancer, so yeah, I'll get that. What's the one for that? Forget. Oh, you know what? I'm a girl, but I feel like a boy, right? So all sorts of things that this is being very clear and concise in their wordings. Oftentimes, when you look at the bills or you look at the regulations, they do kind of dress their language. Sometimes it's inequity things. I know here in Connecticut, we have some quarantine regulations or laws that either were up or I can't remember if they got passed. Yeah, I got to make sure I'm up on those. Is they were doing it as for like people or homelessness or homeless in stable housing situations, and trying to make sure that they had a place to go to be taken care of if they had a communicable disease. But then they also had super broad language in there that basically meant it could be anybody. So really you have to watch out for how sneaky they are with those types of things. There's another one by our favorite lawmaker Dinowitz, gonna have some video coming out about quick impromptu interview. I actually ended up on an elevator with him, and he's big on the COVID shots. Actually, if you go up to the Capitol and you try to go to Dinowitz's office, it says that you have to make an appointment. You have to wear a mask while you're in his office meeting with him, and you have to have your COVID vaccination card so that they can check to make you're vaccinated. And if you don't have those things, then you have to meet him over Zoom. So that's the representatives that you're now paying like $144,000 for a year, I think, in New York. Another one, and this is actually a huge one. This is a vaccine database for all adults. And this is really the beginning stages of the social credit, right? That you must have certain pass certain standards in order to enter into certain establishments. Another one, so currently in New York, there's no religious exemptions for kids under 18. So basically, if you're in K to 12 school, and I guess also preschool, and this is this would do it for everybody, adults, kids, anybody of any age, no religious exemptions in New York. Here's another one that would create, again, this is going to be tied into this one with the vaccine records. This one creates an immunization passport. And so again, it's about, they're going to sell these things like as the protection of privacy. And slightly kind of related to this, a lot of like the blockchain and the 5G and the crypto stuff, they all sell it as being able to protect your privacy. But really, if you're centralizing data, then it puts you at a huge risk for actually not having your privacy protected. Then there's another bill, mandatory COVID-19 shots for college students, and this one was just reintroduced. So again, these are bills that have been up in the past that have people have floated. This bill has actually been introduced in the 2023 session. So mandatory COVID shots for college students. That is in play. So make sure if you're in New York or if you have friends in New York, you tell them you can go on the website, I believe, and mark yay or nay. So that's like at the most basic level. The next thing is to call your rep. Then after that, write them letters, ask for an in-person meeting in your district, right? These are all ways that we can make sure our voice is being heard, and they know that if one person is seeking them out, you represent a whole lot of other people. We have to let them feel that pressure, especially on the heels of in New York. New York actually flipped a couple seats. The reason that the Republicans were able to get a majority in the one chamber is because of the work they did in New York. Yes, the deep blue state of New York turned redder this past election. And so, especially if you're in a place like New York, make sure you keep the pressure on these people. And this is what they are trying to distract you with these headlines, right? They want you caught up on like, oh, Biden did this, but Trump did this. And honestly, that's business as usual. Not saying it should be given the pass, not saying we shouldn't say, hey, don't do that. Not that we shouldn't demand that our federal and presidential elected leaders are held accountable. But we need to make sure that we are putting equal and, I would say, even more of our energy into what is happening at your state level, what is happening at your local level, what is happening, with your school board. My school board, we had a member resign, and now we have it was a Democratic member, it has to be somebody from the same party. And so now there's a runoff between two Democratic people and the board has to vote. And so again, we should be reaching out to our school board members and saying, hey, I want this to be the person who you vote for and not that person, right? We could be writing op-eds in the newspaper. We can be making social media posts on these things. We actually have influence over local politics, and it's just about us getting involved rather than getting caught up in the culture wars, right? Again, not that these issues aren't important, but you see what they do with the headlines. You see how they try to spin things. You see how they don't ask or answer the important questions. We need to do what we can affect change in. And that's paying more attention to those state and local politics and getting less caught up in pointing fingers and talking about how bad Trump is or how bad Biden is or how much you love Trump or how much you love Biden or whatever, whoever the person is. Um, so let's get on, though, to our next story. And this is going to be about the military ending its vaccine mandate. So, of course, the federal government had put mandates all across, except for, of course, elected officials. But if you were contracting with the government, had federal contracts, you had to have your employees have the vaccine. If you worked in various different positions in the federal government, including the military, you had to have the vaccine. And so let's check out this article right here. This is on Yahoo News, but I guess they kind of source it from Fox News. How the push to end the vaccine, or I'm sorry, how the push to end the military vax mandate culminated in the NDAA. So President Biden signed a defense policy on Friday that includes provisions cleared by the House and Senate to repeal the administration's military vaccine mandate. Make this a little bigger. The National Defense Authorization Act will terminate the COVID-19 vaccine for military members, but it does not reinstate members of the military who were discharged, right? So if you already lost your job, SOL, or had benefits cut for refusing to get the vaccine. So you got punished by having a reduction in your benefits or some other type of, your insurance or your retirement or what have you, vacation days maybe. Oh, too bad. You know, that was the rule at the time. This is the rule now. You got in trouble then, you don't get in trouble now. So, and we're going to talk about in a second my friend Elizabeth, who was my co-host last week, owner of Queen Bee's Pharmacy. She put even more insight into how, even though there's no vaccine mandate, there's actually kind of a vaccine mandate. And it's along these lines of we're not taking away any of the punishments that were put in place before. So, reinstatement is a priority for some Republicans who have said the strict mandate is one reason why military recruitment is a record low. So, the Republicans want them to take it a step further and say, you know what, actually, we should rehire these people. And not only that, we're having some issues with recruitment. So, we really need to rehire these people. And I agree. I think that if you lost your job because of the vaccine mandate and now they're saying, oh, we're changing the vaccine mandate, you should be able to come back and be in good standing and be where you are and not lose anything and be thanked for taking such a stand. Like, those are the people we want in our military. The road to mandates termination started in August 2021 when Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin issued a memo requiring all service members to be vaccinated against COVID-19. As a result, a series of lawsuits were filed against the Biden administration on behalf of service members seeking religious and medical exemptions to the mandate. Service members seeking exemptions to the mandate also began speaking out about punishments and involuntary terminations, and the military's recruitment and retainment capabilities began to rapidly drop, right? So that isn't just a thing that Republicans were saying, apparently. That actually the recruitment was actually dropping. I mean, yeah, if I was a young person thinking about going into the military and suddenly they put this requirement on and, I was on the fence, I'll wait. I'll see. I'll do something else. The first federal lawsuit was filed in November 2021 by 35 active duty SEALs and 3 reservists. The suit claimed the military was infringing upon service members' First Amendment freedoms and intimidating them into getting vaccinated against COVID-19. Fox Digital News learned that a series of directives by the U.S. Navy promised severe punishment against violators, including court martial, criminal prosecution, revocation of special operator status, drastic pay cuts, and a ban on travel for SEALs who did not comply with the mandate by the end of November 2021. A lower court issued the first hold on the government's military vaccine mandate early in 2022. So it seems like those people probably lost their job. However, the Supreme Court in March 2022 temporarily granted the Pentagon's request to limit the deployment of unvaccinated active military members who refused to get the COVID shots based on religious grounds while the case continued. So while it was in court, the Pentagon won their request to basically say, well, this is in court, and since you're unvaccinated, you can't work fully. Fox News first reported that unvaccinated Navy sailors who were seeking religious exemption to the Department of Defense COVID-19 vaccine mandate were transferred into deplorable living conditions and in some cases were unable to leave while awaiting termination from the military, according to court documents, right? So basically, they got treated like crap and bullied. Last month, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld an injunction from October that protects unvaccinated U.S. Air Force and Space Force service members from being punished or involuntarily terminated from the military due to religious objections to the vaccine. The Air Force is still grounding pilots who sought religious accommodations to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, but is allowing other unvaccinated service members to resume regular flying duties. The U.S. Marine Corps issued new interim guidance September 14th, posted quietly online, which amended the actions taken against unvaccinated Marines whose religious accommodations requests were denied and who appealed the decision. The amended guidance came after U.S. Federal District Court in Florida issued a preliminary injunction on August 18th, prohibiting Marines from taking certain actions against those seeking religious exemptions. The guidance said Marine Corps will not enforce any order to accept COVID-19 vaccination administration separate or retaliate against Marines in the class for asserting statutory rights under Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The Marines' previous directive required commanders to delay the promotions of any officer and delay/restrict the promotion of any enlisted member refusing the vaccine. So they gave official orders, it looks like, across not just the Marines, but same was being reported in other departments of the armed forces for, again, coercing people by threatening their career, holding them back on their career paths, taking away money, taking away their jobs. Let's see. It says updated guidance outline a series of steps to walk that specific punishment back in specific cases. Additionally, a top general argued that the military's COVID-19 vaccine mandate is putting a dent on recruitment efforts. So again, this is a Fox News article, so it seems like maybe they have the bias to really stress that it's putting a dent on our recruitment efforts, but it seems to be reported from several sources. And again, that does seem to follow in line with what we're going to see in our next story with New York nurses who were on strike, a lot of it due to staffing shortages and being overworked and having crazy hours. And that's because New York City lost tens of thousands of nurses when they put in place their vaccination mandate. But let's keep going with this. Where it is having an impact for sure is on recruiting, where parts of the country there's still misbeliefs about the backstory behind it. The U.S. Army is subjecting unvaccinated soldiers to punishment, including prohibiting off base travel, halting promotions, and enforcing involuntary terminations from service, which active duty service members claim is a strategy to pressure them to abandon their deeply held religious beliefs. An Army spokesman confirmed to Fox News that unvaccinated soldiers, including those without approved religious accommodation exceptions, are subject to certain adverse administrative actions. The Army, which has separated nearly 2,000 soldiers for refusing the COVID vaccine, is having a difficult time filling its ranks. You know, it says that they fell 25% short of its recruiting goal last year. I wonder why they don't like lead with this statistic a little bit further up front. They just kind of refer to it. So again, over and over again, we're seeing that the army really, really, or not just the army, I'm sorry, the armed forces across all of our military really, really crack down on people in the services who refuse to get the COVID vaccine for various reasons. And it was a little bit hard to tell from the story whether those things are still continuing to happen or they were happening in the past. I want to think it was in the past what they're trying to say, since they're saying, okay, now it ended. But again, did it really end if the people who got shot for it aren't allowed to come back? Did it really end if people who, got demoted are still in that demoted position? And so I want to check out this video that my friend and my co-host last week put out about this exact situation. So, Elizabeth, Lady Be Good, go check her out at queenbeespharmacy.com. That's pharmacy with an F. And let's share this.
So, not sure who needs to hear this, but the military banning the mandates does not mean anything if you're in the military. So, after speaking with a soldier that has held the line for the last several years last couple years, and has informed me that if you are in the military and you refuse the clot shot, guess what happens? Nothing. You stay stagnant. You can't move up. You don't get promoted. You can't get a raise. In some instances, you may even get demoted, but you're certainly not going to be able to advance in any career opportunities in the military if you don't subject yourself to the clot shot. Does that sound like it ended? I'm not sure where these large accounts are getting their information. However, if you are following these larger accounts and they're continuing to give you misinformation and you are not calling them out, you are part of the problem. Okay.
All right, so that's Elizabeth in her typical style, but it's an extremely good point. And going back to my overall theme of tonight and of many of the videos that I do, always question the headline, right? Always question, okay, it ended, but what does that actually mean for soldiers? Are they talking to soldiers in there? Are they talking to like top military people? What's the framing of the story? What's the line they're trying to drive? We see that over and over again with our medical freedom stuff in New York City. And I see it everywhere with every story. Both sides do it. It's not a left or a right or Republican or a Democrat thing. It's an everybody's got a narrative to drive thing. So let's keep going because again, very similar to how recruitment issues in the military, healthcare, especially in places like New York where mandates were harsh and continue to be put in place and held in place in many instances. I know in healthcare across the system, it's pretty popular to require the vaccine, even in places where they didn't have other mandates. And I think that has a lot to do, again, with a lot of hospitals getting federal funding, but just in general, like a lot of nursing programs require it. But there's plenty of places, I know healthcare workers who have found jobs in places where they don't have to get it. But in New York, the nurses from two different hospitals went on strike. And so that was about 7,000 nurses. After three, and so they were striking for 3 days. And again, they're making demands about working conditions, being overworked, not low pay. After 3 days on strike, nurses returned to work at two major New York City hospitals after reaching a tentative contract agreement with thousands of striking nurses, ending this week's walkout, officials announced on Thursday. In a dispute over pay and chronic understaffing, New York lost tens of thousands of nurses because of the vaccine mandate. More than 7,000 nurses at two privately owned nonprofit hospitals walked out on Monday after talks to avert a strike failed over the weekend. Each hospital has more than 1,000 beds, according to the Associated Press. The New York State Nurse Association said more than 3,500 nurses at Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx, this is actually really close to where I used to work, where my school was, and about 3,600 at Mount Sinai Hospital in the Upper East Side in Manhattan reached a new 3-year contract. Several other private hospitals around the city reached deals with union ahead of the strike deadline, which included raises totaling 19% over 3 years. Ooh, 19%. Okay. The agreements with both hospitals include concrete enforceable staffing ratios, the union said. So again, because the big issue is they're understaffed. The agreement with Montefiore also included what the union described as community health improvements and nurse-student partnerships to relocate nurses from the Bronx. Through our unity and by putting it all on the line, we won enforceable, safe staffing ratios at Montefiore and Mount Sinai, where nurses went on strike for patient care. Nurse Association President Nancy Hagan said in a statement, "Today we can return to work with our heads held high, knowing our victory means safer care for our patients and more sustainable jobs for our profession." The hospitals say they have been grappling with widespread nursing shortages that were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, they say it's exacerbated by the pandemic, and they're not saying what the truth is, that it was exacerbated by the COVID-19 vaccine mandates. And in New York City, I guess you could say, especially in the beginning, there was overwhelmed in hospitals because they didn't know what to do. And New York City was the epicenter, but also they didn't handle it well. They didn't do the smart thing. If you look at the procedures and the policies of a lot of these hospitals, the way that they were requiring people to take tests and stay there till results, they weren't keeping people on separate floors. There's a lot of questions to be had about what was going on there. And then, of course, there were all of the healthcare workers everywhere else making TikTok videos and stuff like that. So I don't know what's up with that. But they're not at least telling the whole story by just saying the pandemic in general. Montefiore said in a statement that it was focusing on ensuring the nurses had the best possible working environment with significant wage and benefit enhancements through the deal with the union. "We know the strike impacted everyone, not just our nurses, and we were committed to coming to a resolution as soon as possible to minimize disruptions to patient care." Mount Sinai said in a statement that it was pleased to have reached a tentative agreement and that the strike was over. "Our proposed agreement is similar to those between NYSNA and 8 other New York City hospitals. It is fair and responsible and puts patients first." Union officials plan to provide details in the contracted agreement. So again, this is nurses. They were on strike in New York City. I like to shout out to the workers. Um, I would say my political history is a little bit mixed. Traditionally, I didn't necessarily see myself as somebody who would go out and strike or protest. I was in college when the Occupy Wall Street protests happened, and there was a bunch of kids who I knew and I was friendly with, and who drove down to New York City and they participated in them. But for me, I was sort of like, I just want to go to college and I want to learn something and I want to do something, go out into the world and make the world a better place. I don't necessarily think I'm to the point where these protests are achieving. Oh, my sign fell. what what I just don't see the protests as achieving anything. Like, I think that we need to go out and do things. And while I might have been wrong about my inclination of protesting in general, I think that there is more of a place to protesting than I had once thought is, in college. I do think I was right about those protests. Like, I think there was a lot of controlled opposition and they didn't actually go anywhere. And that is also my kind of critique of the medical freedom stuff. I think it's important to get out there in the streets and let them know what you're feeling, but I think you also have to evolve. It can't be the only thing that you do. Otherwise, it's very one dimensional. It's very draining. You have to pair that with other actions that you take. But I do want to, I definitely now see myself more as the worker. I definitely see, there's the ruling class and then there's the regular people, and those are workers at all different socioeconomic levels. And again, especially workers that I know have been impacted by the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, whether that's why they lost their job or whether that's why their job is extremely difficult now because of staffing shortages because of the COVID-19 vaccine mandate that forced people out. I definitely empathize with them deeply. So, shout out to the nurses in New York who were standing up for their rights and really, came home with a big increase in pay and hopefully better working conditions that do then translate into better care for patients. Um so let's then go ahead see what our next story is here. I do think I wanted to like set it up to go right into the next story. Oh yeah. Speaking of healthcare workers in New York and the vaccine mandate, there was a huge win for healthcare workers in New York. And so we're going to return back to teachersforchoice.org, my favorite source for all news on medical freedom, especially in New York. But so New York healthcare workers that were fired for declining the COVID shot win in court. And the attorney on this case is Sujata Gibson. And this case is in the New York State Supreme Court. Important to note, this is the New York State Supreme Court. This is the lowest court in the state of New York, and it is not the Supreme Court of the United States, which is the highest court in the United States. There are many levels to go between the New York State Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of the United States. So that's just important to know that this case is at the lowest level. As we'll learn quickly in this article, will likely be appealed. It will go to the Court of Appeals, and then, it can bounce back and forth from there several times before it might have the opportunity to then go to the Supreme Court of the United States. Also, Sujata Gibson is the lawyer who is working with a whole team of lawyers actually on our lawsuit for our teachers' religious exemption case. And we are going to have a court date coming up very soon on February 8th. So make sure you're tuning in for updates on that. But let's go ahead and get into this case. Big win here. Today, which was Friday, Judge Gerard J. Neri ruled that the COVID vaccine mandate for New York healthcare workers implemented by Governor Kathy Hochul is arbitrary and capricious, null and void, and cannot be enforced. This means that healthcare workers should, italicized, be reinstated for their jobs. However, we can be pretty sure that Kathy Hochul and Attorney General Trish James will be appealing this decision, which may pause the ruling from taking effect until the appeal is decided, right? So, again, New York State Supreme Court is the lowest court. Kathy Hochul and her administration will appeal the decision. And as we've seen in most of these cases, as the decision is appealed, whatever ruling might have been decided, like in this case, the healthcare workers should get their job back, but while they appeal, that's not in play. They'll still not have their jobs. So let's go on to just finish this off. Judge Neri repeatedly states that the COVID vaccine does not prevent transmission and therefore does not serve the purpose put forth by the state. And I really do think that this is perhaps one of the most important points. I was watching that Neil deGrasse Tyson video earlier. He went on to Patrick David Bett's show and was like talking about vaccine and how it was okay for the public health to mandate it, and never once did Patrick David Bett, or yeah, Bet David, mentioned that it doesn't prevent transmission. It doesn't. So what? It doesn't prevent transmission. Like, I don't even want to argue about any of the other stuff, any of the specifics and data. Like, it doesn't prevent transmission. Person who is vaccinated and a person who is unvaccinated can both spread it. So we don't have to even debate about anything else. Argument over. Okay, rant over. Attorney Sujata Gibson is also my attorney and the lead attorney on Kane v. de Blasio, as well as the New Yorkers for Religious Liberty, NYC. And all these cases are backed by Children's Health Defense. So again, there's a lot of cases going through the system right now, and these are just in New York. There are cases all over the country. And I'm sure there's amazing person in your state who's like Michael Caine and Teachers for Choice, who's collecting and aggregating that data. And if there is not, and you're kind of looking for your place in the liberty movement, maybe that's you, right? Do the research, start a blog. It doesn't cost much, if anything at all, to do that, and just your time and whatever, I guess, to host a website. But it's just a pretty, basic website, a blog, posting up every few days some updates on this topic. So you can do that. And again, if there probably is somebody out there already doing it, though, find that person, read the information, take action. Anyways, even though this decision is going to be appealed, this is a victory. It's a good sign for teachers and educators who've been fired for declining the vaccine, and for anybody, anywhere, in any profession. As these rulings stack up and pile up, as the precedents build, it is inevitable, as we see these stories are breaking into the mainstream media every day, that this regime will fall, that it will be recognized that mandates were wrong, that people will get their jobs back, that there will be lawsuits to get compensation. Now, what does, about sustaining those victories and what it means in the long term, and how that affects the overall politics and trajectory of this country, that's another story. But I do believe that there will be victory, even if they try to keep it out of the mainstream and suppress the headlines. Keep the faith, keep fighting. So go to teachersforchoice.org. You can read the entire ruling. Again, I highly encourage you to do so. Understanding kind of the legal arguments, the legal stuff is always slightly different than our commonplace understanding. But again, Teachers for Choice, go check out his blog. Great information. And this is also similar to the case that happened in November, where we saw headlines about sanitation workers in the New York State Supreme Court right here. This is the one. So back at the end of October, New York Supreme Court reinstates fired sanitation workers who did not comply with the New York City vaccine mandate. So again, we saw these headlines. Yeah, the judge's order totally did say that these workers should be reinstated. And of course, people see the headline Supreme Court and they're like, oh, the Supreme Court mandated it. This is it. This means that they're getting their job back. They won. Woohoo, victory. Good job, guys. Good job, team. But if you know and you're reading critically, that can't be the full story. If they're reporting it that way, it just can't be the full story. There's got to be a catch. There's got to be something else. There's got to be, either a follow-up that you're missing. That is because you're not reading teachersforchoice.org. You're not following Michael Caine on Instagram or on Twitter, because if you were, you would know that no one in New York City has gotten their job back. And so he has, an article that's on that on his website. He posts about them on social media so you know when they come out, because you would know that the New York Supreme Court is the lowest court, and that immediately the next morning, Kathy Hochul, oh no, it's no New York City, but I'm sorry, in New York City. So it would be Eric Adams and his administration, the mayor of New York, appealed that decision. And so while it's under a court of appeals, the decision doesn't take place. They didn't get their jobs back. It's still important, because again, it's just one more victory that's stacking up as these things are bouncing around in the courts, making their precedents. Justice is a long road, and we will keep fighting. I just, we got to stay strong. Again, like I said, teachers, we have our case coming up February 8th. Make sure that you tune in to support us, checking in, seeing what's happening. We're in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. We've been going through the system for a while. We have made a couple of pleas to the Supreme Court saying, hey, will you check out our case? We haven't made the writ certiorari, I'm not saying that exactly correctly, the thing that you have to write the full brief to get to the Supreme Court. These have just been for them to consider smaller aspects of the case, not the full case. So we're still bouncing around the courts. February 8th. Make sure you're checking in. Also, make sure that you're following me on social media, Instagram, Twitter. I'm over here on Teaching Liberty. You can check me out. Make sure that you like this video, subscribe to this video. We do this here every Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Plus, I put out another video every week or so. And we're just going to be consistent over here, just really trying to grow this, really trying to spread liberty, trying to approach it from many different perspectives and experiences, really trying to break out of that left right paradigm of that culture war, social media, really, short 1 10-second clip kind of deals, and create our own stories, build our own systems. Of course, we can't be completely, I don't believe that we can be completely out of the system as it is. We can't we can't leave a complete vacuum, because I think that's sort of been the downfall of, for lack of a better term, our side of the movement, people who believe in individual liberty. We're too individualists. We too just taking care of our roost and our family, and not really fortifying our defenses, and better yet, playing some offense. We're too reactionary because we're just in our own world. And so it's what's that balance? That's an idea and a topic I'm really going to continue to explore, right? Those big ideas. How can we have that balance between individual liberty, making sure that we're good on our own and at a really small micro community level, but also doing what we need to do outwardly on that kind of that town, that state, that federal level, to not just fortify and play defense, but to play some offense, and to really, really try to get back to the core of the ideas that are expressed in the Constitution, and continue that progression to expand access to democracy and to liberty, but in a way that is true to the core values of life, of liberty, of the pursuit of happiness, of free speech, of freedom of religion, of freedom of um to the right to bear arms, right? Really making sure that people are innocent until proven guilty, that the government isn't overstepping their bounds in collecting our information in the age of information. What does that look like? We need to get back to that mission. And to do that, it really means cutting through the headlines of, oh, Republican bad, oh, Democrat bad, oh, Trump is amazing, Biden is amazing, my team, rah, rah, rah. And asking the questions and having the conversations. So let's keep doing it. I'd love to have you on as my co-host for this Saturday Night Live, or maybe we just do a separate podcast. Maybe we do a live over on Instagram, whatever it is. Let me know. Leave a comment. I love your beautiful face. Stay free and keep teaching liberty.